So today I'm going to show you how to attach and create this frosting here at the top of the cupcake. And as you can tell, it's actually a coiled up tube that kind of comes to a point on one end. And after you're finished knitting it, it looks like this. How I stuff this after I'm finished knitting it is I simply take a little bit of stuffing like this, and I take a straight ordinary knitting needle, and then I just tuck the stuffing in like this, and I push it up through the tube with the end of my knitting needle like this. Okay, and this one's actually fully stuffed. Then if it gets lumpy anywhere, like here, you just roll it with your fingers like this and even it out. That evens out the stuffing there, just like that. Okay, and I'm going to actually leave the bottom ½ inch unstuffed so that it's easier for me to sew it on. I need this to behave and be kind of flat for the sewing on process. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this loose end here, thread it into my needle, and I'm just going to very quickly and easily sew it closed. It doesn't have to be a very tidy job because it's going to be completely hidden. Okay, there it is, sewn shut, and I'm just going to lock in my yarn so the stitches don't go anywhere. And then I'm actually going to hide my loose end right inside the tube, and I just pull it through, make sure the corner isn't buckling, and clip it. I just pull it tight, just slightly, and clip it, and then it's hidden in there and secure forever. Okay. The next thing about this cupcake is that it is designed in such a way that it has a point inside, because this twisted frosting here, it actually creates a little space in the middle, a little triangular space. And the first few times that I tried to design this cupcake, the frosting wouldn't stay and wouldn't remain in its position because it had a hollow in the center that weakened the structure. And so that's why this knitted cupcake has this kind of strange little top here. Now, color-wise, in terms of choosing thread, I suggest that you choose something that more or less matches the frosting color instead of the brown or the color of the base of the cupcake, because it'll be less visible. So here's my thread. Here's my thread, and I'm just gonna have an ordinary sewing needle here and thread it. I'd like to point out that the technique that I'm about to use is called basting. Basting is a sewing technique where you basically tack something on loosely in order for it to hold its position so that you can sew it on better. Because if I were to just attempt to coil the frosting on right now and pin it in place, watch what happens. Here are some pins. They just come right out. Because the frosting is stuffed and it has some spring to it now, there's absolutely no way to pin this onto the cupcake. And so it has to be basted on. And the first step is to sew the flat end of the frosting on, and I kind of sew it on not directly flat like this, but actually it leans against the point on the cupcake a little bit. And so I'm gonna stitch in the same spot for a few stitches just to lock in my thread. There it is, it's locked in. Now, and I'm just going to sew this part on pretty securely because it's not going anywhere. It's going to remain in this spot forever. So that's perfect. permanent. Looks like I have a little knot in my thread. That's okay. That's typical for YouTube. Something always goes horrendously wrong. Okay, now I'm gonna give the frosting a slight twist because I just think it looks better when it has a slight twist in it. Okay, and I'm just gonna position it like I want it to be. All right, so that looks pretty good to me. That's kind of how I want my frosting to be. And you see how the way that I sewed my end on creates a very tight closure here, and it looks very finished. So now I'm going to baste it, which means I'm going to be doing big stitches like this. I just went through several layers. And then I'm just going to grab a little bit here and go back down like this. And then I'm just going to make sure I got a little bit there and go all the way through to here. So I'm basically holding it with one hand and basting the frosting into position, and I'm just going to grab a little bit under at the base of the cupcake, and then go back up. And I'm just looking for places that are loose and it would benefit me to connect them. Now most of the time basting stitches are taken out, removed completely after you're done actually finally sewing the thing on. But in this case, I'm going to leave the basting stitches. They just add a little bit more security. I'm just going to leave them on. Okay, let's get this. You can see that it's actually starting to behave itself a little bit better. Okay. See, I can even let go and it kind of holds its position. Got to keep that twist in it. Okay, and I'm going to even come up here and baste this little point in the position that I want it to be in. And all the way through to the bottom again. All right, now that's basted on. And this is the point where I come in and I actually start sewing it on for real. And I'm just gonna do a series of little stitches now as I'm really starting to sew it on permanently. Just like this. So what I'm doing is I'm grabbing a little bit of the pink frosting like this and a little bit of the cupcake. I have a chocolate cupcake here, so I'm just going to refer to it as the brown. And I'm just going to pretend like the basting stitches aren't there, so I don't rely on those loose stitches as my finished sewing, and I just go right over those spots again. And here's the little area where my frosting overlaps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the pink frosting forward a little bit. Like this. And the good thing is, if you don't like how this is turning out, you can take these stitches out completely, very quickly, and start over again. All right, almost done with the first layer. All right, the first layer is sewn on. And then I go up to the second ring and then the third ring. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. I'm going to come back and sew that second ring on in a little bit, but for the sake of this video, I'm going to skip forward. I'm going to do the point of the cupcake. So that's the general idea. And now that it's sewn on for good and it's nice and firmly on there, I can do put a few finishing touches on this frosting here. For example, one thing that I might want to do is fix the point a little bit. You see I have kind of the knitted point, it kind of doesn't have a perfect shape. So one thing I could do is take a felting needle and just poke at it a little bit a few times, just to tangle those little loose fibers and make it come to a slightly better point here at the top. And what I'm just doing is I'm actually felting the knitting that's there, felting those knitted stitches. And always when you're doing needle felting, you got to do the most important step, which is to felt all the little fibers together by rolling it in your hands. And I'm just going to clip that little bit right there. And so now I even have a slightly better point forming here. And of course this cupcake needs just a little bit of work, but it's getting there. And eventually when it's finished, it'll look like this. Now these little beads, they're actually they're little pins, sewing pins. But you don't have to use the cupcake as a pin cushion. You can sew little sprinkles onto it, or little rhinestones or beads, however you want to do it. And your cupcake is done.